Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit. We have a huge guest today, legendary pro wrestler, the current NWA World Historic Welterweight Champion, and New Japan's own Rocky Romero. Welcome, Rocky. Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit.
I appreciate it. That's a cool intro. I love it.
Thank you.
I was digging it. It got me pumped. I'm ready to go. I'm all excited.
Let's rock. Those were the guitar stylings of one Hugh Myron,
Nice.
also from LA.
Nice.
So great to have you here. It's a big time of year for New Japan. You guys have a bunch of events here in the States, which I'm excited about as a longtime New Japan fan. I want to quickly mention that New Japan Resurgence is this Sunday, May 21st on pay-per-view on Fight. And if you are in the Long Beach area,
it's on New Japan World.
It's on New Japan World.
It's a New Japan World exclusive pay-per-view this time.
Yeah. My apologies for the miscommunication. Yeah, so
no worries.
Resurgence on New Japan. And if you're in Long Beach, get your ass down to the Walter Pyramid. Watch New Japan live. It's like no other pro wrestling out there.
Yeah. It's in a great building too, Walter Pyramid. There's not a bad seat in the house. It's like perfectly made for professional wrestling in that arena. It's a beautiful arena.
Awesome. And Squared Circle Pit is about the connection between pro wrestling and music, typically rock music, but you obviously have a connection through the world of hip hop. And I'm curious, what did you get into first, pro wrestling or hip hop?
First love was wrestling. Second love was like movies, and then third came music. So I used to watch wrestling with my grandma. My parents would work on the weekends, like Saturdays and stuff. So they dropped me off with my grandma. My grandma was like old Puerto Rican lady. She used to watch wrestling back in Puerto Rico and in New York City, where she lived for many, many years. And they moved to LA, and so she would just watch it on TV. So she'd make Jello, and we'd watch WWF Superstars every Saturday. And she used to, throw her chanclas at the TV. Yeah, she was super into it. So I think like that love and energy kind of like, obviously was the reason that I got so into, I think, professional wrestling and that excitement of it.
So what was do you remember your earliest wrestling memory? Like the first thing you saw or connected with you?
I would say probably like the first big one that like was actually like I remember like choosing sides was probably Warrior versus Hogan, like that, and that like I was such a Hogan fan, and it was like a huge like dilemma for me because I was really into Warrior, and I felt like Warrior was gonna win. So like I remember being like just completely torn, but then I was like, screw it, I'm going with Warrior. I know he's the future.
I was depressed for like a week after I saw that match. Like, no, how did Hogan lose? How could it be?
I was torn. I was a Hulkamaniac for so many years, and but then I just thought Warrior was so cool. He was like, I used to, wrap stuff around my arms, like my shoelaces, take my shoelaces off my shoes and put them around my arms, and, press like stuffed animals, in my room, so like I was totally just fascinated by Warrior at that moment. And just, he looked like a superhero, like you legit did. This incredible body and like this incredible energy and cool music. Talk about music. I mean, he had a great theme. Yeah, it was super cool. So that was my first kind of like big dilemma and like first big moment that I could remember was probably that had like an effect on me emotionally,
Mm-hmm. So you grew up in LA? Is that where you?
I grew up in LA.
When did you go from just watching wrestling to thinking like, oh, this is something I can do or I want to pursue it?
So probably like around 96 or so, like when WCW started getting really big. I remember WCW, then I started watching like ECW. I think the first time I saw ECW, it wrestling felt obtainable, like it felt like, okay, look at like, I was like completely fascinated by ECW and the whole movement, especially at that time. I was probably like, I don't know, 14 or something, 13, 14. So it's
The
like
ideal demographic.
exactly. So I just started to feel like, you know what, like, look at, like, I saw guys like, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho, you saw these small, Eddie Guerrero, you saw these smaller guys becoming, pretty big professional wrestlers, right, in the world. So I started to think, oh, wow, well, they went to this place called ECW. I think I could make it to a place like ECW. I mean, like, it looks like any Joe Schmo could make it there, at that time, So I started to think, okay, cool. Well, I don't know how to do that, So I joined my wrestling team, at high school, because I figured maybe somewhere down the line it was connected, even though, not knowing. And then obviously, and then I saw Beyond the Mat, and then I saw, like, oh, you go to a professional wrestling school and then they teach you. So then I thought, all right, as soon as I graduate high school, Northern California is not that far from here, and I'll just move and go and join, the APW Academy, and I'll start to do it. And then I think during this, like, when I became 16 or so, I started to, like, I was just, like, browsing on the internet, and I saw a school called the School of Hard Knocks in San Bernardino. I was like, San Bernardino's like an hour away from me. I was like, okay. So I called up, and I talked to Jesse Hernandez, picked up the phone, and then he said, yeah, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 16. He's like, oh, we got another 16-year-old. You can totally work with him. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. He's like, all right, yeah, you got to bring your parents, though, and you got to have them come check it out and sign off on it. And I was like, okay. So my mom came down with me, and she didn't know what the hell was going on, of course. And she walked into this, we walked into this little place, tiny place, where the ring barely fit in the room. And it was like, like each edge was like touching the wall. And, the ropes, from the third rope to the ceiling was like, like if you could only stand up on like the second rope, and your head was like touching the ceiling. So in this tiny space, but there's like posters all over the wall, like old posters. And it was really cool. It was like I don't know, for me, it was a huge deal. I think for my mom, she was like, what are you doing? Like, what do you want to be?
Why are you in this garage?
Yes, it's nuts. But then, yeah, she met Jesse, and it also obviously helped that, like, there was another 16-year-old there that was training. So yeah, she stuck around for the session, watched, and then from there, I had just gotten my license, and I started, going to training like 2 or 3 times a week, and yeah, and just fell in love. It was like the only thing I could think about,
Yeah, and then the New Japan Dojo opened up, like the first iteration of it,
Right.
on the West Coast. And I'm sure, were you into New Japan leading up to that? And like, how did you end up in the dojo there?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, once I started wrestling, then I, saw, we would like, trade tapes like between like all the students, and somebody gave me a Super J Cup, the first one, and I was like blown away. I was like, what is this? Okay, you wrestle in Japan, you wrestle in front of like 15,000 people, and it's like crazy. It's like the best wrestler. All the, Sasuke, and I think like Nani was in that, and like, obviously, Jericho and Ultimo Dragon. So like all these names that, you did see in WCW and ECW at that time, but then, Liger, and like, I don't know, it just seemed like amazing. And like how the crowd treated the wrestlers was way different than what, American fans, were saying and doing, and treating, professional wrestling here. So it was just, there was so much honor behind it. So I just kind of fell in love with that. And I was like, I think I can make it to Japan. And I kind of wanted to do the route of like the guys that had been successful. So like my dream was like, oh, I want to go to Mexico. I want to go to Japan. And then ECW or whatever, WCW or, whatever the route was, because it seemed like that was already a route that people were doing, right, if you wanted to be successful. So I immediately thought oh, that I should do that. So I just was trying to get into Japan for so long early in the career, and just kept getting I was really skinny. I just wasn't ready, and then finally I started working at a company called UPW out here, which was Rick Bassman's company, and they were like connected to the WWE. They were like an early like HWA, and I think FCW and UPW were like developmental territories for WWE during that time. And I met a guy named Justin McCulley, and who's a former UFC fighter and professional wrestler. And he was connected with the Inokis, and that's kind of how I got connected. So me and Samoa Joe were talking. He's like, "Oh, do you know Justin?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, they're going to be opening up a New Japan dojo here in LA." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, why don't you, come by?" So he called Justin, set it up, and Justin was like, "Yeah, we're going to actually, if you just want to come by, we've got a bunch of equipment. We could use a bunch of hands just to start helping us like move all this equipment into this warehouse." And I was like, "Of course," So like me, Ricky Reyes, and TJP showed up, and we're like, "What do you need?" So we're like moving equipment and like actually setting up the dojo. And then, they were like, "Okay, Antonio Inoki's going to be here Monday. Why don't you come? We're going to train." I was like, "All right." And then that's how it started. We just started showing up, and we showed up like every day for like a year. That's basically, you couldn't get rid of us. And then we just, we started training at the dojo, and we kind of became the first class of the Inoki dojo, or New Japan LA dojo, and rest is history. Yeah.
So like, that's crazy to me. Like, did you kind of know who Inoki was by that point, and like, what kind of vibe did he give off when you first met him? Was it scary? I don't know.
Of course.
Like, I just see him on TV and I'm scared.
It's frightening. Of course we knew who Antonio Inoki was. By this time, of course we're huge fans of New Japan, and we know, who he is and what he means to the industry, and So, the first day he came in, we're shitting our pants, he walks in and, he starts talking to you, and you're like, what am I, like, this is the way I am. I'm like, just like, what am I doing here? Like, how am I here? This is always in my career, is like, what is going on with my life? Why am I here? Like, it's just, it's so mind blowing. But yeah, then, to actually start training with him. And I in the beginning, he doesn't know who these kids are. He's like, well, what's going on? But then, after a while, he definitely really started to open up to us, and obviously like teach us, and talk about professional wrestling in such a different way than like I was used to. Like the way that he talks about professional wrestling is like, it's like big, it's like art, it's like, I don't know, like he would compare it to music all the time. He's like, talk about like, the rhythm of a song and song structure, and being like, this is how, your professional wrestling matches need to be done, So like, like it was crazy. It was just really, really cool. And also just being at the dojo itself, you never know who was going to show up. Like you walk in one day and like DDP would be there, because everybody wanted to work with Inoki. Everybody was attracted to Inoki. DDP would be there the next day. Ken Shamrock would show up. And then he'd be like, "Oh, let me teach you guys how to do these knee bars and leg submissions." And then China came in, and she worked with us for a really long time. And who else? It was just crazy, like, because, or like Randy Couture would come in. It'd be like nuts, So like, it was just a really crazy time, between UFC, Pride, and, New Japan at that time in like the early 2000s. It was just like anybody could show up, and it was always, it was just a really wild ride. Like the whole thing.
It was a crazy scene. Everyone was still hungry, and like no one's a millionaire yet. So everyone just kind of wants to come in and like hang
and
out.
Even the people who had money were showing up because they were trying
because of Inoki, right?
Because of Inoki, So it was just a super cool time. And then, like I said, he really opened up to us, Inoki. And like there'd be times where like they would ask me to drive him, so I'd pick him up from his his apartment and his condo, and then take him to whatever, like business meetings and stuff. It's like, I'm like, what was going on, so like that it was pretty cool. But I definitely got to spend a lot of like one-on-one time with him as well, which was really neat. And then obviously like later, a couple years later, when I really started to work for New Japan, and I became Black Tiger and stuff, like I always tell a story where I was in the dojo, and it was like but they had the Super Junior was kind of split between, they had the first half and the second half. And in the middle of it, they were going to take a break of the middle of the Super Junior and they're going to go to Italy. So they had this like 3 or 4 day tour in Italy, 3 or 4 date tour in Italy, but you're there for like 7 days or something. I wasn't planning on being there. They're just like, just stay in Tokyo. You know, you can hang out at the dojo, train for the week, and then everybody's going to come back. We'll continue the tour. It was like when I first became Black Tiger. And I think 2 days before the tour started, I was staying at the dojo in Japan, and it's like midnight, and you know, I'm like getting ready for bed. And one of the young lions, I don't know who it was, I can't remember, but like I hear the phone ring downstairs, and I hear somebody shimming up the stairs, and like there's a knock on my door. They're like, "Oh, Inoki-san wants you to go to Roppongi right now and meet him at his bar." And I was like, okay. The boss calls, you gotta go, right? So
because I got a party.
Exactly. Threw on some clothes, went down there, and you know, I walk in. It's like midnight already, you know. So I walk in, and they sent a taxi for me. I walk in, and I'm greeted, and it's just like cigar smoke all throughout the bar. It was like out of a movie, dude. And you know, all these just bunch of Japanese businessmen around. Inoki, he's sitting right in the center, and he's like, "Rocky, come." I was like, "All right." So I sat down next to him, and he's like, "Oh, do you drink whiskey?" I was like, "Yeah," you know. And he's like, "Do you smoke cigars?" Sure. And probably never have in my life at that moment, but yeah, I'm just like cigar in hand, whiskey in the other hand, you know, drinking with Inoki. Yeah, hanging out with Inoki was awesome, you know. And then he's, you know, he started conversating with me, and he's like, "Oh, are you going to Italy? Are you excited about Italy?" I was like, "Oh, I'm not going. I'm actually just going to stay until the rest of the tour starts." And he's like, "You're one of our best wrestlers. How are you not on Italy?" I was like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Okay." So then, you know, whatever the night progresses, and then I get home, and I think it's like 8 or 9 in the morning. I'm like asleep already, and then I hear the phone ring again, ding, 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 and I hear one of the young lions shimming up the stairs and knock on my door again. It's like, I'm like, what is going on now? They're like, "Oh, I need your passport. I need to run it down to the office because you're going to Italy." I was like, "Oh,
All right.
There you go. Sounds good." You know. So, but yeah, it was cool. Yeah, like stuff like that would happen. It was just like crazy. Like, I don't know, it was cool. Yeah, it was a fun time.
Did he have like once you got to know him a little more and he let his guard down, did he have like a quirk or something where you're like, "Oh, he's such a normal person," you know, like this isn't a guy, this is just a regular person, you know, anything like that comes to mind?
He never felt like a regular person. Like, honestly,
all right,
I mean,
that's fair.
Yeah, he felt like the god of professional wrestling. You know,
Yeah,
like I don't know, like he was always larger than life, even when it was just one-on-one. You know, I felt like he just had such a presence about him. You know.
One thing you mentioned I wanted to bring up again was how he said that a match is like a song, which is really interesting. Because like in my head, I've thought it the opposite way. Like sometimes I look at songs and I'm like, "Oh, here's like the high spot of the song where like they're really
Right.
into this," you know, like whatever. Or but it's interesting to hear it the other way around, and because ultimately it's just entertainment and it's just capturing a person's like attention and taking them on a ride, right?
Right. But there's a certain psychology to that, right? With everything, you know, and you know, he would talk, you know, there's an intro, you know, which is like, you know, you're showing, you know, like the basis of what you're about to do, you know, and then you would talk about like at that point, you know, like there's a big crescendo, and that should be like where you start to think about where you're going to finish this whole song, you know, and how you're going to finish it on a high note, you know, things like that. So, yeah, he would come. Yeah, it was like, I mean, you're with like a philosopher, a guy who created, you know, some of the biggest, craziest angles in professional wrestling, especially for Japanese professional wrestling. I mean, the guy was definitely constantly thinking out of the box and trying to get all of us as young men to think that way, to really like think out of the box. And he would always be complaining, like, you know, in New Japan, they do the same stuff. They do this, they do that. Everybody's doing this. Why are we doing it that way? challenge it, you know, like do something different, you know, come up with a different look, come up with a different way of professional wrestling. He's like, that's what I want you guys to represent, you know, for me, you know, if this is your training base and you guys are training with me, like show the world, you know, that how to wrestle differently and not just do the same thing. He's like, everybody locks up in headlocks, you know. He's like, I don't want to see any lockups, so we wouldn't do any lockups, you know.
Oh wow.
So yeah, but then we show up to you know, Japan, and they're like, what the hell's wrong with these kids? You know?
Yeah, why are they doing lockups?
Yeah, why are they So that was also like kind of the dichotomy of like at that time too, like obviously Inoki was the president and the owner, right? Or he was the owner, sorry, not the president. But then, you know, there's always politics on both sides, right? Like in power plays, you know. So like New Japan is trying to do one thing, Inoki's trying to do another thing. You know, he wanted it to be more like, you know, MMA stuff. He could see that MMA was going to rise up, you know, and take over professional wrestling in a way and be bigger than it. So then he was trying to go this way. Everybody else wanted to go that way, you know, so there was like a big power play and like unknowing it, we were just like in the middle of it, you know, so like we didn't really have a ton of support from the Japanese, like pro wrestling side, you know, for the office side, because we're like under Inoki, you know, so it was weird, but then it kind of all worked out, you know, but
it's like another facet of the business that you have to learn on your feet of like, oh,
sure.
just because this one person says something, it
for sure.
doesn't mean that's the way it is. You gotta
exactly
yourself. Yeah,
exactly. So
and that's interesting with the philosophy stuff, because when I first started getting into Japan around like Wrestle Kingdom 9, the thing that kind of drew me to it was the sport presentation, which I think is so different from how American wrestling presents it. You kind of had it with WCW a little bit in like the early 90s, but like for example, the G1, what I love about the G1 is it really feels like the Olympics of wrestling, of just like here's like all the best wrestlers and they're going to put on the best, it's like the best exhibitions, and it's just about the matches. And I think that's it's interesting that like how you're saying, like how Japan treats the wrestlers, it's totally different, because here they're kind of seen as actors almost, whereas they're more like athletes.
It's like D-level celebrities and just like I don't know, like I always think like professional wrestling, I mean, it's starting to get better now, obviously. Like I think definitely people are taking wrestling more serious, but I feel like if you're kind of an older fan, then you kind of know that like it was like the lowest of the entertainment rung, you know. So you know, maybe like some reality stars might be like, or reality might be TV might be like replaced it in a way, but because you've got like Bad Bunny doing professional wrestling, you know, and doing it at a high level. But well, you got to remember, right, the history of professional wrestling in Japan is huge, right? So like there was a time where in the 80s Inoki and Tiger Mask were probably like the two biggest celebrities in Japan, because you know, they were on free, there's only free television at this time, right? In the 80s. So, you know, this is before cable, and cable really never took off in Japan as well. So it's kind of always been around about free TV. So there was a time where, you know, 60% of the population was probably watching New Japan Pro Wrestling on a Friday night, you know, at 8 p.m. So, I mean, megastars. So like, and then for the, you know, for people, I mean, it was treated like a sport. It was treated grounded, you know, New Japan, especially Inoki was, you know, going against, you know, the world kickboxing champion, the world Russian, you know, sambo champion, you know, so like he was going against all these martial arts, you know, so people were thinking, wow, well, oh, wow, professional wrestling is the strongest martial art there is. You know, that's how he was presenting it. I mean, he was really a genius when you think about it. But, and so I think that, especially in Japan, there was a seriousness to it, as opposed to like it was more than like the circus entertainment aspect of it, which would kind of like turned into in the like early 90s here, you know, right?
Yeah, I agreed completely. Well, speaking of the early 90s, you said you grew up in LA, and I feel, of course, there was the explosion of hip hop in LA in the early 90s in general. Like, do you remember how did the music capture you at first?
Right. So honestly, probably the one I was talking about this recently with somebody, but Nothing But a G Thing, that song was like, I don't know, the right time. I was like going into 6th grade, I believe. And, obviously everything is changing in your life. I saw that music video and heard that song. And then I was like, whoa, like this is nuts. And yeah, so I think that I remember that being like the first big song that was like, that had a big impact on me hip hop wise. But I mean, I'm honestly like, hip hop is the easiest music for me to make, I guess, in a way, just because like I'm not a musician. I can't play the guitar. I can't play, an instrument. So hip hop was the easiest to make because that was like easy to make on FL Studio, Fruity Loops, so and that was like the first tool that I started to like really play around with and start to make music with. So yeah, like I kind of got into that, but like I also write and do all kinds of music because I'm super eclectic, and the things that I listen to is definitely not only hip hop.
Oh, okay, great.
At all. No, at all. I mean, I love like, punk music, and like, I mean, I grew up, I was in high school in 98, 97, up to 2000. So like that whole genre of like, ska, punk, and, skate punk, or whatever you want to call it. And like, I love that stuff. I was going to gigs and stuff when I was in high school like crazy. Yeah, my favorite artist of all time is the Beatles. So, I mean,
okay.
So like, they're like, I feel like I like them. I like to be able to listen to an album and have like all these different like styles of music, or like styles of song. It's not just repetitive, so.
Do you have a favorite Beatles record?
Probably Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Did you see that they had like a special on Disney Plus that was like 7 hours of them?
I watched the whole thing. I thought it was incredible.
So fascinating. Yeah, I agree.
Incredible.
It was.
I could have done another 7 hours. Oh my God! To see them like working music out and like see their personalities and like the drama in between them at that time too was so fascinating. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I love just watching them just like, all right, let's just jam for a little bit because we're so fucking tired of working on this song. And that would have been like the crazy, like it's just like Paul and John jamming and Yoko screaming or whatever. But it was so cool. It was so cool. Like I love it.
I just go out without Yoko screaming. I'm never a fan of that. But yeah,
I feel like this doc really humanized her for me. Like, oh, she's fine. She's
for
fine.
Sure.
But I hear
you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. You're right. I kind of felt that way too. But yeah, I just never got it.
Yeah. I mean, it's too artsy for me as well. But
exactly.
But I appreciated that they humored her to be like, hey, get in on this, Yoko. Like don't just sit there. Let's party.
Yeah, but it's cool too to like see them jam and like come up with riffs and things, and then you see like oh wait, isn't that sounds familiar? Like and they're coming up with stuff on the fly there, which is super cool. Like. I don't know. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that doc was fascinating.
Yeah. And just that what I loved about my favorite thing about it was that they're such perfectionists that they kept putting like, all right, we have one more day. No, let's do another week. Let's do another 2 weeks. And then at the end of it, they're like, you know what? We're going to shelve this whole album. We're going to go do another album and then come back to this in a year. Like that's so fascinating to me that they had that resource.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, and like even their worst album would be like so much better than everybody else's, best album, So it's just like they could have just put it out and made millions, and that would be it, and it'd be fine. But no,
they're almost like a genre unto themselves because they have such 100% catalog.
Yeah.
So at Resurgence, you're teaming with Kazuchika Okada. Okada, in my opinion, one of the maybe top 3 wrestlers in the world right now. And what I love is that you guys have this like great friendship that
Yeah.
I only see in a parasocial way on social media, but it looks like, like when Okada's in the ring, he's the most serious wrestler. He's on top of his game. He's the best. But then, like, out of the ring, he seems like the goofiest, silliest person.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I love that.
Yeah. No, he man, he's such a special guy. He like really is. Yeah, obviously, like he's one of the most talented professional wrestlers I've ever seen. But yeah, his personality and the way he conducts himself with everyone is like everything that you would think of like what a top guy or a top professional wrestler should be is him. You know what I'm saying? That's what it should be. I feel like, like there's no ego, there's no, he treats everybody the same, which is like amazing, like, and like I said, there's no real ego with him. Besides, he wants to be like when he has out there performing, it's at 150%, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he's goofy as hell. He's so goofy. He's like the things that we'll text each other or like whatever, like I don't know. It's just fun. He's just fun, and he makes, when you're in Japan and you're there for 3 or 4 weeks and you're on a tour and you're tired and you've been moving from town to town, his sense of humor is what gets you through it, in making you laugh, and not taking it too seriously sometimes, when you're under stress and you're under pressure and you keep thinking, man, at the end of this tour, I have to have this big match. And like, what is it going to be? And, like you're stressed out. Yeah. He shows up and he's like, he went to like, Don Quixote, which is like their Target or Walmart or something, and bought like a bunch of like stupid hats and just walks in like nothing, walks into the room with this stupid hat on. And then just acts like nobody, like it's not a big deal.
Like no sells it.
Yeah, just completely no sells it, walks in like no big deal. And everybody's watching him, right? And everybody's like giggling and he hears it and he's like turns around and he's like, he's got a stupid face on, like what?
That's great. And like you're in your zone, you're getting anxious, and then you see that and it just bursts that bubble.
100%. Yeah. He's a different man. He's of a different breed for sure. He's and like I said, he's the best. He's the best. I love that dude.
Do you guys travel by like faction when you're on these tours, or is it just like one big? Okay, so you're just on the road with him constantly, and the other Chaos guys.
Yes, yeah. So and so much that going out to dinner and stuff. You do it. You do a lot of dinners with your group, with your faction, because basically every time you go to, there's always somebody that's going to have some kind of hospitality for the wrestlers to come in, because like we talked about, it's a big deal. So when like the wrestling comes to town, it's like they've got their own friends and people who might be supporting the event that day in that town. So they'll invite like your faction to whatever, so like we'll go to dinner. So you're with these guys all day long, until you get to your room at night. But yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool. And you obviously get to really get to know them, which is cool. And, obviously there's a language barrier in some kind of way, but you also get to really know, like, how these guys really are and their quirks and stuff,
How good is your Japanese now at this point?
Terrible. I never studied.
It's so difficult.
Studied. Yeah. The funny thing is it's been a while now because I haven't really been going back to Japan as much as I used to, but I'd like to know where I stand. But yeah, if I'm in the room and I can pick up on like what the conversation's about, and pick up little things in the conversation, especially. So I it's okay. But I never studied, and if I did study, I'd probably be okay. I'd probably learn pretty quickly, but I just don't have the time.
Just get by.
Yeah, I get by. I can order. You know, I
Yeah.
think from anybody who doesn't know anything, it's probably like, oh, you're impressive. You know, but it's not. It's not. I'll be
Right,
honest.
right.
It's just a work. Yeah.
So after Resurgence, the next big show is Forbidden Door. I was very fortunate to be
Well, we
at
got
the first.
Dominion in between too, I think.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I was talking about the American shows, but yes,
Oh,
Dominion.
cool. Yeah.
There's the All Together Again show, which sounds
Right.
crazy with the All Japan and the Noah thing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Forbidden Door. I was at last year's Forbidden Door, and I remember in the lead up, everyone was like, "Oh, this lineup is it's all a mess, and it's such a chaos." But then, like at the end, like when I was there, it was the best event I've ever been to. It was so exciting.
Mhm.
The crowd was so happy to be there, and me included, and I feel like it kind of just like rubbed off on the show because like everything was getting a reaction. And I think also for a lot of the New Japan guys, it was the first time they performed in front of a crowd that was able to cheer because there were still the restrictions at the time.
Right.
Yeah. So it was just such a special show. And then afterwards, Tony Khan is saying that like you were like, he was giving you praise. How crazy was that time for you to have to like be the liaison and like with all of these moving parts and injuries and I'm assuming visa issues, must have been a lot of late nights on the phone.
Terrible, stressful. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, even now, I started to travel with AEW every week. So I mean, like you've seen me a lot on AEW now, like just getting ready because I realized last year it was helpful if I was there frequently, so that you're kind of putting together this big card, right? So like as things happen, people get ideas, things start to boil. If I'm around, I might have a talk with Chris Jericho and say hello, and Jericho will be like, I have this idea, so like things are percolating, right? So I realized, okay, the earlier I get there, the better and easier it's going to be when we put all this together. And so yeah, I'm traveling with them a lot more now, almost every week, and that seems to help. And then yeah, I'm definitely on the phone with Tony and texting with him constantly, and going back and forth between him and New Japan to him. So yeah, Forbidden Door this year is going to be nuts for sure. Like it's going to be good. Hoping that no injuries, obviously like
Right.
last year is injuries, COVID, visa, all kinds of stuff. But I think that this year will be good. So now it's just a matter of when do things start, so it's like, the hardest part about Forbidden Door is Dominion is like June 4th, right? And then Double or Nothing is like May 27th or 8th or whatever it is, right? So it's like the two biggest New Japan show and big, huge, AEW show are all ending. So it's like, can't start storylines too early, can't put it, so that they've kind of just be like perfectly placed in this 2 to 3 weeks right before Forbidden Door, which is not a huge buildup, right? But you also don't need a huge buildup for two companies coming together to put on a show. I mean, it's really the spectacle of dream matches and dream scenarios, and just kind of it's more of like a party than anything. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not like you're building to WrestleMania, where you need 3 to 4 months of storyline to build it. So I think like last year that was like, I think a lot of fans were very critical of like how the build was going to be, and the tease of Okada, which they're like, "Where's Okada? Where's Okada?"
How is he not on TV?
Chill out. Like Okada's on tour in Japan, where there's two companies running simultaneously, and they need and everybody needs their stars, right? So it's like you can't just have Okada come for a month to America just to do that, So it's just not even possible, So and he was the champ at that time, so everything was on him, So yeah, so the funny thing is I knew exactly when Okada was going to show up, and it was going to be like, that's the perfect time you want him to show up, because you'd think he's not going to show up. It seems like he's not. And then he's going to show up, and then here we are. Now we're, a couple days within the pay-per-view. And that's the most important week. That's the most important time, because that's when everybody wants to get excited about the pay-per-view. So
And
got a
in the
massive
end,
pop.
and in the end, like like a year later, no one's like, hey, that build up, they didn't get Okada on TV. Nobody's talking about that. Everyone's talking like that 4-way was insane, or
Yeah,
like
the whole
or Orange Cassidy and Will Ospreay stole the show.
Oh my God,
like all that
dude,
stuff.
that pay-per-view was so electric and so incredible, and the fans were like, we definitely, like, we got lucky in the fact that, obviously it's like a traveling crowd too that's coming to that show. It's not, I mean, Chicago's great. There's a huge base in Chicago, yeah, but it's like mostly traveling fans who really, really, really love both products and want to be there. So like, and that's why I'm saying it's like a party. It's like you invited all your closest friends who are just gonna come and hang out and that are so excited about this moment. And share.
There's no casuals that you had to win over. Everybody knew everybody's shtick. Like everybody knew the Minoru Suzuki song.
Yep.
There was no thing. Yeah, so I'm very excited for this year as well. I did end up getting a ticket. I'm going to be flying to Toronto, all because I was like, I had too much fun last year. I need to. I'm in New York anyway. Not a long flight. I could do it.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I do end up. I think that it'll be, if everything works out, it'll probably be like comparable to top 3 pay-per-views of the year for sure. Events of the year for sure, easily.
And also I just feel like with a crowd like that, like the wrestlers hear that and they want to put on a better show.
1000%.
They want to like reward the crowd for being there.
Mm. I just don't know how we're going to get everybody on, because of course everybody wants to be a part of it, and there's only so many matches you can do.
Like last year I was like, how is Toriano not on this? Like it seems so
it's hard. I mean, you got 2 companies. It's so hard. Yeah,
there's only so many spots and only like 4 hours to go.
Yeah, I was talking to Tony. I was like, all right, I just put together a list of all like the ideas from both sides and da. So like we sent it. I was like, he's like, oh my God, these are amazing. Like we're both going like, but this is too much. Like there's too many options, too many ideas. It's like going to the buffet and being like, what do I eat? Or like, so that's good problems obviously to have, in that kind of situation. And obviously it's like, this is a thing to do for many, many years, so like if it doesn't happen this year, it can happen next year. And if it doesn't happen next year, it can happen the year after that, so it's like, I feel like let's do our best to keep making it bigger and bigger every year, but like, let's not, we obviously can't, it's impossible to do everything, that we want to do, but yeah, let's just keep the momentum going. And then, hopefully one day we can do it in Japan as well. Maybe there's a time where we can do one in America and one in Japan, that would be really cool, or like second day of, Wrestle Kingdom is, Forbidden Door, whatever, Forbidden Door Japan, or, so that's my hope, is we get there, like to one day, do that. I think that would be special.
I'm just very happy that you guys are working together. There was whatever, it just made, I love that it's such a great relationship and a good way to help introduce New Japan to like newer casual American fans as well, I think.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah.
And also you have the All-Star Junior Festival in Philly in August. And I think that's so cool that you're bringing over all these Japanese traditions. A few years ago was the G1 in Dallas and all this stuff. Is it crazy to book something like that because with the juniors, I'm assuming, like some of them might not have visas. You got to go through all that legal stuff. Is it just like even crazier, I'm assuming, than Forbidden Door? Because this is like all on New Japan at this point to do something like that? Or
no, I mean we're kind of used to it now, the good thing is like something like that, to have a huge runway to like get everything ready is important, right? So it's like we couldn't have done that, if we do like hey, we're gonna do this show in 3 months, or something like that, it would be impossible, right? But to have like a 6 month plus lead in is much easier. Yeah, much easier. So plus the opportunity to have different junior heavyweights from America who wouldn't be able to maybe come over to Japan and get the opportunity, right? So like, I want to see GCW involved. I want to see like, obviously Impact and AEW both, CMLL of course, but also like independent names who are really great, who wouldn't be able to maybe mix in with us or maybe couldn't, come to Japan because, that's not easy. But yeah, I want to see that type of talent get the opportunity, and then really try to mix it up as much as possible. Like every match should be like really fresh, which should be cool. Like first time matchups. And I know when they did the All-Star Junior Festival in Japan, Hiromu did like a bunch of tag matches. So like obviously like it's a festival, right? So it's trying to get as many people on as possible. But I hope that there's a couple more like special singles matches, or something like that, because I know that like American fans will appreciate that more than like singles matches than a bunch of like 8-man tags, so.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that New Japan has done so well, that you make a singles match. It's almost in a way like its own kind of title match because they're 100%. So much rarer that it's a special occasion when New Japan has one.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's like another thing that, when you first start watching New Japan, you're like, why is there so many of these, and then you start to realize like, because like single matches are a big deal, they're going somewhere for storyline wise or ending something storyline wise. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I grew to really love the tags because it seems like it's less pressure. You can get angles over like advanced feuds and like still showcase all the wrestlers with their like special moves. So
yeah,
it ends up being a fun thing. It's almost like those are like the weekly TVs leading to the big pay-per-view.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel like
it's very old school, like live event style, territory style. I think like in the fact that you get those build up matches, but they're not like overbearing or anything like that. They're usually seem light, right? They feel light, and then you see how dramatic they could end up being if need be, and where they go, angle wise or storyline wise. But yeah, I love the tags. Like you said, it's not a lot of pressure, but then you can still get the storyline across and build to where you need to be, and just give them a taste, right? Give the fan base just a taste of like what could happen or what might happen. So yeah, like I always am interested, like even when I'm in the ring, like watching, okay, whatever, we're going to know that Naito is going to wrestle Okada at the end of the tour, right? So I'm always curious to see, like, we're going to wrestle 17 times before that. How much are they going to do? What are they going to do? Are these going to be any spots or playoffs that we're going to see in the actual match? Like that's as a wrestler, like I'm just like always curious, like, and always watching, like, to see that last, because then everybody knows that they're like, the fan base knows that they're going to wrestle at the end, right? So like, are they going to start off today, or are they going to like wait until like the middle of the match to do their big moment? Like it's always cool to say. And then like, I love like with them, like you never know, right? So like, I don't know, it's just fun to watch. Like they may not barely do anything together, and like really leave it up to the fan base to be like, what's going to happen, in your imagination. Or they might like give them a spot where like they're doing all their stuff and everybody's trying to hit their moves, but like nothing works at all. I don't know. Yeah. It's just cool. It's cool to see the build up for me. And like, it's such a different type of psychology than like America, right? Like American psychology building towards a big match, So it's like really just built all in the ring. What moves are they going to do? It's like, what are they going to do? Okada is going to be more dominant. Is Naito going to be more dominant? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's just very, very different psychology. Yeah.
Yeah. And also you get like these moments where it's like Okada in the ring with Hiromu, which you wouldn't really see. And you get like a fun exchange there. I always enjoy those mismatches kind of.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask about your latest music video, Dale Azúcar, because was this recorded in Arena, Mexico?
Arena Coliseum. Yeah.
Oh, Arena Coliseum. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool that you got it in the, you shot a video in the ring, and that was like a fun thing. Fun use of resources.
Yeah, I'm so proud of that music video because, you know, for multiple levels, it was like advancing a storyline with Volador. So for like people who don't know, I'm in this rivalry with Volador Jr., who's like one of the top, CMLL stars, and he's the good guy, I'm the bad guy, and my thing is I'm just like constantly talking shit, on him and kind of like Arena Mexico and CMLL and like what's going on, and like I'm trying to take what I know that works in American wrestling and bring a little bit of that and kind of like blur some of the lines. Like nobody talks about the owner, nobody talks about the programacion, which is like the matchmaking committee, like nobody talks about them. Where like I'll just drop in just like a little nugget in there and like say something about that, which is like so taboo there. But I know that, I'm appealing to a certain fan base, part of their fan base, right? Who are gonna, really pump this up because they control like the wrestling media there, so like, so I knew that like, okay, what can I do that's fresh and different? Because in CMLL, they don't do, they're the opposite of AAA, so they don't do a bunch of entertainment, style angles, right? So like, okay, well, I can do like a couple of entertainment style angles that'll probably progress us. I mean, this is who I am, right? Like I'm an American professional wrestler coming to Mexico. It's very different than like, a Mexican wrestler doing that, so let me bring that influence and try that. But I'm still going to wrestle like, like how I wrestle and, like a New Japan style or whatever, So I got the opportunity and I came up with the idea like a week and a half, 2 weeks out to do this video. And I've been thinking of like, I want to do a song, but like, how do I make this all work? And then I've been calling Volador Jr. Like in the first interview I did, I just came up with like, there's like a thing in Spanish where you say, oh, I'm your daddy, or something like that. Yo soy tu papá, right? It's like such a diss, right? So, and Volador Jr. his dad is a wrestler. His dad is Volador Sr., who's like a famous wrestler, right? And then I said, well, I want to break, the first interview I did with him, I said, at the press conference, I was like, well, I want to break the news today. This is going to be the biggest story in the history of professional wrestling here. It's like, Volador Sr. is not your dad. I'm your dad. And then that stupid thing became the whole kind of storyline, right? Like in a way, and like one of the biggest parts of the story, like, and everybody loved it, So in the opening of the video, and this was the biggest reason of doing the video was just this opening. The rest of it was just going to be fun and like to get new music and stuff. But the opening of the video is me with a 13-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid, and he's got a Volador mask on, and I keep calling him. And then Volador's real name is Ramon, so I never call him Volador. I always call him Ramon or Ramoncito, which is like little Ramon, So like. So I'm with the kid and I call the kid, Ramoncito, like I've been saying. And then he goes, and the kid says like, Dad, I want to be a famous wrestler like you when I grow up. And I said, kid, you can try, but you'll never be as good as me, something like that in Spanish, So it's such a diss again on him, So it's like, the fan base love that too, because they don't really do stuff like that, And then to go and do this outlandish video with like dancers and in Arena Coliseo, and it was super cool. I had thrown it together. I was able to get a team together, and like I paid for it out of my own pocket. I was like, I'm gonna fucking make this so cool, and it was a hit, and it was really, really cool. So and it definitely progressed the storyline even more to get to the hair match and everything. So yeah,
that must have been so cool when they came to you like, hey, we want you to do a hair match. What? Sure.
yeah. But I was trying to think like, well, what can we do to make this unique too, and different to get to the hair match instead of just doing like the same, like, oh, you beat me up, I beat you up, and we yell at each other. It's like, oh, like we have an opportunity to do something that normal fans of CMLL haven't seen, but like I know they'll enjoy, like I wanted to be that clown, but then like when I get in the ring, I'm like kicking ass, So I think we accomplished that pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool that you're bringing in like kind of hip hop tropes of starting a feud and insulting the guy through rap, bringing it to this feud that
diss
you have.
track.
Yeah, with a diss track. Exactly. That's I couldn't the phrase escaped me, but yeah, like a diss track. Like I don't think they have that very much in CMLL, so I'm sure that was a new way to build the heat.
Not even in wrestling, really. I mean, like maybe Cena, right, when he was doing like Word Life and all that,
right? Or like Max Caster a little bit.
Oh, Max Caster, yeah, Max Caster is a weekly thing doing that, yeah. But yeah, it's definitely not something that's like that everybody can do or has done, right? So yeah, that's super cool to do that, and yeah, and then I got to make a music video in Arena Coliseum, and like, I don't know, that's cool. It's really cool.
That's a lifetime memory right there.
100%. I'm so proud of it. And then it's funny too, because like every time like I go somewhere, like one of the wrestlers, one of the guys would be like, "I saw your music video. It's amazing." It's like, yeah, that's what you. I mean, because like I was talking with Eddie Kingston about this. It was like, it's great to know the fans like care about you or like, or they're enjoying what you're doing, but it's so different than when you hear it from your peers. It's like, oh man, that really means something, or like, or like, oh, I did it. When you hear it from your peers and your peers say something nice about you, or like say, put you over in some kind of way. Like, there's nothing better than that. So yeah, it's cool to hear.
Awesome. So definitely check out that Dale Azúcar on YouTube. Check it out. Great video. And New Japan Resurgence this Sunday, May 21st on New Japan World, NJPWWorld.com. You should just get a subscription. It's pretty great.
Yeah, it's like $9 or something with the currency exchange. And there's obviously the old matches, the newer matches. You get Wrestle Kingdom every year for free. So I mean, just that alone is worth the subscription, I think, for the year.
Agreed. And Dominion coming up. Dominion is like, if Wrestle Kingdom is WrestleMania, Dominion is like the SummerSlam, I feel.
Exactly.
It's like the second biggest event of the year. Always delivers. Right. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, the US stuff, it's iPay-per-view, so you'll pay a little extra for it, since it's iPay-per-view. But stream quality will be great because it's a world. There won't be any issues, and as well as just like, you should be watching what's happening in New Japan USA, because obviously there's definitely going to be stuff that's going to build towards Forbidden Door, and there's going to be stuff that builds towards Dominion. So it's like, you don't want to miss one of the important steps on the way to the big shows. Yeah.
And you don't want to miss Mercedes Moné.
Not at all.
That's great too.
Yeah.
I'm loving it. I'm loving all the New Japan exposure in the States, how it's getting bigger. New Japan has always been one of my favorites. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Rocky. Thank you so much for making the time. I
appreciate it.
Sharing some stories.
Yeah, anytime. Whenever you need me, I'll always be here.
All right. We'll see you next week then.
I'll see you next week.